Hey everybody, last time we got together, I gave a basic introduction outlining the 4 phases of the French Revolution. And so I thought what we would do over the next coming weeks is to systematically attack this and break these phases down to help us have a better understanding of the course of the French Revolution. But before I do that, I need to draw our attention to the whiteboard because, hey, there he is, everybody. There he is, Louis XVI in all his glory. Yes, once again, this year he has made my whiteboard because you know what? He is the image that I'm using to represent the absolute monarchy in France. There he is, Louis XVI. We'll be talking more about him later. Glad to see him back. My image that I used for the moderate phase of the French Revolution is this little drawing right here. This little drawing right here. Hopefully you can tell what that is. It's supposed to be a constitution. And the reason I use that as my symbol is because during the moderate phase, the big picture thing is that France went from an absolute monarchy to a limited monarchy. So I drew as my symbol the Constitution. So look, you could draw a lot of symbols in here. There are a lot of events, a lot of symbols that you could use to represent the moderate phase. And so what we're going to do, and I wrote some of those events down here on the board, is we're going to look through some of the key events that made up the moderate phase of the revolution, some of the things that we talked about in class. And yeah, we'll just take those one at a time and give a brief explanation and kind of summary of those events and why they were so important. So the first thing we talked about was the National Assembly. You know, Louis XVI had called a meeting of the Estates General, and the Third Estate, of course, was that, you know, they were upset over the voting procedure. They wanted a new constitution. They wanted equal taxation. Of course, you know, the First and the Second Estate weren't interested in that. Of course, the king certainly wasn't interested in that. So, you know, the Third Estate went off and declared themselves the National Assembly to be the true representatives of the people of France. Of course, you know, the king certainly wanted nothing to do with that. And of course, he proved that because the next day when they came back for their meeting, he had locked the meeting doors. But that did not deter them. They just simply went to a nearby indoor tennis court where they began to meet. And that's where they declared this right here, the tennis court oath. The tennis court oath was a declaration of the Third Estate saying, we will not stop meeting until we write a new constitution. You know, it's significant because it's the first time that people really stood up against the French monarchy. And I've heard it also said that the tennis court oath could be compared to our own Declaration of Independence. So a very significant moment in the history of France. But while this is going on at Versailles, I should say, back in Paris, there's an event called the storming of the Bastille. Word of these changes had gotten back to the people in Paris, and so on July 14th, 1789, an event, the storming of the Bastille, takes place where the mobs of people in Paris attacked the Bastille. The Bastille was basically a prison/fortress that was used extensively in medieval France as a place to house prisoners. Currently, it didn't really have a lot of prisoners, but it did have some weapons and gunpowder that the masses of people were looking for because they had heard that the king may be mustering his forces outside of Paris to put this whole thing down. So a lot of panic in the streets. They attack the Bastille. They kill the guards. They behead the warden. And basically, the revolution is on. But it's a lot more than just that event and what they actually did to the Bastille, attacking that. Because more than anything, you guys, it was symbolic. The Bastille represented something. It represented the French monarchy. It represented the oppressive French monarchy. It represented the old ancient regime. And so by tearing that building down brick by brick, which is what they actually did, it's like we're tearing down the old and we're going to build the new. So that's the storming of the Bastille, July 14th, 1789. In fact, Bastille Day today, July 14th, is still a day recognized in France as the beginning of the French Revolution. So, but it's not going on, again, not just at Versailles, not just in Paris, but there's also fear gripping the countryside. The great fear is a peasant uprising in the countryside. Peasants are fearful that foreign troops are going to invade and put down this revolution. They begin to attack the homes of their lords and nobles, looking for any feudal documents or records that might indicate feudal obligations and dues that they owe, and they destroy those records. So fear is gripping the countryside. So you have Versailles, the official meetings there. You have the storming the Bastille, the mobs of people in Paris attacking the Bastille. You have fear in the countryside. And then later in the year, October 1789, you have something called the Women's March to Versailles, where the women of Paris actually take it upon themselves to march forcefully to Versailles, looking to bring back the king. They're protesting the lack of bread. And they feel like, hey, the king has the grain, the king has bread, we need him to come back, see the suffering of the people in Paris, and that's what we're going to do. And we're not going to be stopped, we're going to bring him back to Paris. And that's exactly what happens. Thousands and thousands of people led by these women head to Versailles. They forcibly take the king, the queen, his son, they bring them back to Paris. And basically, for the next 2 years, he kind of becomes a prisoner of the people of Paris. Not technically, but in a real sense, he's kind of forced to go along with what the people want. And that will also be the last time the royal family ever sees Versailles. Well, we'll find out why that is in the future videos. But anyways, basically the king is there for the next 2 years, but he makes a decision in June of 1791. I have here on the board, it says the flight to Varennes. The flight to Varennes was the night when the king and his family left Paris in the middle of the night, seeking safety and refuge in Austria. The reason they wanted to go to Austria is, well, a couple things. One, there were 10,000 troops on the border waiting to support the king, but also Queen Marie Antoinette's brother, her brother was the King of Austria. So Austria represented freedom, represented safety, represented support, and they were so very close to making it there. In fact, they were on the very last stop, one more checkpoint to get through when they got arrested. They had been found out, they had been discovered, someone had recognized them, and they were captured and ultimately brought back to Paris. So basically, at that point, that's going to, begin to really, for many people, kind of the event that, they began to, change their view a little bit about the king and the monarchy. And it's going to transition things into a little bit more of a radical phase as we get into 1792 and beyond. And we'll talk about that more later. But right now, let's just take a minute before we move from the moderate phase, let's focus on some of the positive achievements that came out of the moderate phase, because quite honestly, there were several really big achievements. And let me kind of guide your attention down the board. I wrote a few of them down right here. You can probably see them written. The ending of the estate system. Okay, the ending of the estate system. That's one of the first things that happened at the meeting of the States General when the Third Estate declared themselves a National Assembly. Ultimately, they ended that old system, that old structured system, that estate system came to an end. The First, Second, and Third Estate, that ended early on, so that is no more. Another thing I have written down here, hopefully you can see, is something called the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, a famous document that provided for individual freedoms, civil liberties, equality in the law, equal taxation. It's a document that not only applied to people then, but throughout the centuries has been a document that has been really a part of future constitutions, not only in France, but also countries around the world. So the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, for countries that have a democratic tradition and any kind of democratic government, those ideals are probably a part of it. So that's the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. And then the last thing here in 1791, there it is, hopefully you can see it right there. It says Constitution, that's what happened, guys, 1791. A constitution was written. a constitution was written, and what that does is it changes France from an absolute monarchy to a limited monarchy with that constitution. So a lot of events, you guys, a lot of events, a lot of achievements during the modern phase of the French Revolution. And later this week, we will get into the more radical stage, because that's what's going to happen as you move into 1792 and beyond. But that's for another video. We'll get to that later. What we need to do right now, what we need to do right now is just take it all in. A lot has happened in the moderate phase of the revolution. We need to acknowledge that Louis XVI is back. He is back, bigger and better than ever. He's made the whiteboard. It's pretty awesome. We'll be talking more about him. Now, when we talk about him during the radical stage, he might not be smiling, and well, you'll find out why. But for right now, he's smiling and looking good. Man, love that dude. Love that dude. I'll catch up with you guys later. See ya.